My name is Marielle Trent, and at 38, I've learned that silence can be both armor and cage. I use it when rooms grow too sharp, when voices sharpen to prove themselves. But that morning, silence nearly became my undoing. The lights dimmed in the executive boardroom as Tatsia Lorne advanced her slides. My work, 3 months of data models and market predictions, filled the wall-sized screen. She'd marked them in red, angry circles around figures she called critical errors. "These are Marielle's projections," she said, her tone soft with rehearsed concern. "They deviate from standard forecasting models by nearly 20%. If implemented, they could expose us to significant risk." A murmur rippled through the room. 12 executives leaned forward. The air turned close, almost heavy. Across the long glass table, the CEO's expression settled into that neutral look that always precedes a verdict. I sat very still, hands clasped on the folder in front of me. Every click of her presentation felt like another nail sealing my work inside a coffin. I remembered the nights I'd stayed in the office until the janitors turned off the lights, testing patterns until they aligned patterns no standard model had ever captured. "This volatility map," Tasia continued, "misrepresents the actual market structure. It's mathematically unsound." She sounded almost tender, as if rescuing the company from me. The CEO turned toward her. "And you're certain of that assessment?" "Absolutely," she said, and smiled. For a moment, I thought I could hear my pulse echoing through the table. I felt heat crawl up my neck, not from shame, but from the clarity that comes right before you choose whether to fight or fold. When she finished, the room waited for me to speak. I took a slow breath, looked at the screen, my data, my colors, my design, and then at her. "One question," I said. My voice sounded calm, even to me. "If these methods are so unsound, could you explain why the client's own brief specifically requested them?" Tasia blinked. The CEO's pen stopped tapping. Chairs creaked as heads turned. The room went very still. And in that silence, something inside me began to wake. I wasn't always quiet. In college, I argued through every seminar until one professor said, almost kindly, "Marielle, you don't have to win every conversation to be right." It sounded like advice, but I heard warning. From then on, I learned that sometimes the person who speaks last isn't the one in control. It's the one who lets silence work for them. At Keystone Investments, silence helped me survive. I built forecasting models that outperformed standard methods, but I never fought for credit. The results spoke louder than I ever could. Clients noticed, leadership didn't. That seemed fair enough. I wasn't there to be noticed. I was there to be accurate. I remember when Director Paxton called me into his office 2 years ago. He glanced at the graphs I'd printed, his expression unreadable. "Impressive results," he said. "How did you manage this pattern recognition?" I replied, "Nonlinear volatility models. They respond faster than conventional trend lines." He nodded once, already distracted. "Keep refining it. We'll decide later if it's worth implementing." That later never came. And I never asked again. My mother would have told me to speak up. She'd been a programmer in the 1980s, one of the only women in her department. She used to joke that she spent half her career translating ideas men later got promoted for. When she retired, her company threw her a cake with the wrong name on it. I learned too late. She told me once, "Silence is comfortable, but comfort kills progress." I didn't understand her then. I do now. Over the years, I taught myself to blend in the invisible variable that kept the equation balanced. Even when I knew others took credit, I convinced myself the work mattered more than the spotlight. It was safer that way, until Tasia. She understood something I didn't. Silence only protects you until someone else decides to use your quiet against you, and by the time I realized it, she'd already turned my restraint into ammunition. The night after the meeting, I stayed in the office long after everyone else had gone. The floor lights dimmed automatically at 9, leaving the glass walls ghostly and pale. I opened my archive folder, the one labeled Wellington Group Initial Brief, and scrolled through the documents line by line. Page 17 stopped me cold. There it was. Request inclusion of nonlinear volatility mapping methodology for extended forecasting accuracy. The same model Tazia had called reckless. The same graphs she had circled in red. I printed the page and held it in my hands until the heat of the paper faded. I remembered the day Wellington's research director, Dr. Nari, had explained what they wanted. Traditional models miss the outliers, he'd said. We need patterns that adapt. We're not afraid of unconventional thinking, just untested ego. I had laughed at the time, promising him I'd bring both caution and innovation. Now, that promise sat in my hands, signed by their team, stamped, dated, proof. I heard footsteps and turned. Tasia leaned against the doorway, still dressed for victory. "You're still here?" she asked. "After today's performance, I'd take the night off. I'm reviewing the client's brief," I said evenly. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Be careful. Marielle, leadership doesn't like messy data or messy defenses. Sometimes it's better to accept feedback gracefully." "You mean quietly?" I replied. "Call it whatever you want." She pushed off the doorframe. "Some of us understand how this place works." After she left, I stared at her reflection fading in the glass wall. She wasn't wrong. I did understand how this place worked too late. I had handed her everything she needed by assuming honesty was a shared language. I placed the printed page in a new folder marked Evidence. The ink wasn't even dry when I realized what I'd been part of a company where truth wasn't buried, it was edited, and I had just found the one line they hadn't managed to erase. I used to think the company rewarded results. Then I watched how Tasia played the room. She never spoke too much in meetings, just enough. A small laugh at the right moment. A flattering nod when a director spoke. A line about cross-department collaboration that sounded selfless but always circled back to her. I thought it was harmless. I was wrong. When clients sent progress reports, Tasia volunteered to summarize them for leadership. What she delivered sounded polished, but distorted my innovations described as experimental risks, my delays labeled data instability. One morning, Director Paxton called me into his office. "Marielle," he said, "I've been hearing concerns about consistency. Perhaps slow down until we're confident in these methods." I stared at him. Concerns from whom he avoided my eyes. "Let's just say some of your peers think you're pushing beyond standard compliance." "I'm following the exact model the client approved," I said quietly. "Still?" he replied. "Optics matter. Keep things simple." Optics. That word clung to me like static. After that, Tasia's position grew stronger. She was suddenly invited to executive luncheons, tagged in internal newsletters, quoted in meetings where I wasn't present. She didn't need to win arguments, she just rewrote them before they happened. I began saving everything: client briefs, version logs, timestamps of edits. I recorded every update, not to expose her yet, but to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. Late nights became my pattern again. Each time I documented another quiet change, another missing file. I felt something unfamiliar replace fear focus. A week later, I overheard Tasia outside the break room, laughing softly with a director. "She's brilliant, but she doesn't understand people," Tasia said. "That's her weakness." The words stung because they were half true. For years I had believed numbers were neutral, that accuracy would speak for itself. But in a company that valued appearance over truth, precision wasn't a shield, it was a target, and Tasia knew exactly where to aim. The next morning, the boardroom looked exactly as it had before. Same polished table, same executives, same projection screen. But the air felt different, thicker, heavier, Director Paxton began. "Before we move forward, we need clarity regarding the Wellington report." I stood, folder in hand. "Then we should start here." I placed the bound document on the table. The Wellington Group logo gleamed faintly under the lights. I opened it to page 17 and turned it toward the CEO. "This is the client's official brief," I said. "It specifies a nonlinear volatility model, my model, as the required framework." Tasia's voice broke the quiet. "That can't be accurate. Wellington expected industry-standard forecasting." Read it, I said softly. The CEO adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the shuffle of paper. Then his expression changed a slow, visible shift from doubt to realization. He looked at Tazia. You dismissed this methodology. She straightened in her chair. Based on the data she presented. Yes, it didn't align with our compliance benchmarks. That's because those benchmarks don't apply to this account, I said. The client's research team spent 2 years developing this approach. They hired us precisely because I understood it. A faint tremor crossed her jaw. I was acting in the company's best interest. Paxton's voice cut in. By contradicting the client brief, silence stretched. Chairs creaked as the executives exchanged glances. For the first time, the power in the room tilted not through volume, but through paper and ink. I gathered the copies and placed them neatly before each director. Every figure Tazia called a mistake came directly from this document, verified, approved, and time-stamped. The CEO closed the file slowly. We'll need to confirm this with Wellington immediately. Across the table, Tazia's hands tightened on her pen. The color had drained from her face. For months, my work had been spoken about. That morning, for the first time, it spoke for itself. The confirmation came 2 days later. Wellington's research director, Dr. Nari, joined our video call and spoke with the same precision he used in every line of data. Keystone's nonlinear model aligns perfectly with our requested parameters. We're pleased with the results. Director Paxton exhaled audibly. Then it settled. The CEO nodded. Effective immediately. Mariel Trent will lead the Wellington account. I managed a polite smile. Applause followed brief, mechanical. Across the table, Tazia kept her expression neutral, but her fingers drummed a steady rhythm on her notebook. When the meeting ended, she approached me by the elevators. Congratulations, she said. Thank you. She tilted her head. You must feel vindicated. I feel relieved. Relief doesn't last, she murmured. You'll learn that. The elevator doors opened and she stepped inside without looking back. By evening, the promotion email was circulating through the office. My inbox flooded with polite messages, some sincere, most curious. I stayed late again, cleaning my drive, organizing reports, trying to feel proud. But pride felt distant, like a sound through thick glass. At 9:30, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Enjoy it while it lasts. I stared at it for a long time, half expecting another to follow. None came. When I checked my shared folder, 3 files were missing recent drafts of the Wellington model. I opened the system log. Access times were blank. The folder history showed nothing. It was as if the files had never existed. The next morning, a meeting invitation from Paxton had vanished from my calendar. His assistant swore she'd sent it. Maybe it was a sync error, she said. Her tone was polite, but her eyes slid away too quickly. At lunch, the usual chatter in the break room hushed when I entered. Someone had changed the atmosphere. I could feel it like a temperature drop. That night, I sat alone in my new corner office, watching the city lights blur against the window. The promotion was real, but so was the silence that came with it. In the weeks that followed, I stopped trusting the quiet. Every number, every file, every login felt like a potential trap. I stayed late most nights, cross-checking formulas, copying backups onto an encrypted drive. Twice, the system froze mid-save. The third time, my access was denied altogether. Unauthorized credentials. The screen read, I called IT. A technician named Ben answered. Strange, he said. It shows your clearance was revoked yesterday. By whom? He paused. The request came from leadership, Director Paxton's office. That's impossible, I said. I can restore it temporarily, but you'll need formal approval to make it permanent. When I logged back in, half my dataset had vanished. The next morning, an internal memo arrived in my inbox, copied to the CEO and Wellington's team. It contained the quarterly draft report, but someone had altered it. My projections were inflated. The risk values doubled. It looked reckless. Within minutes, Dr. Nari called. "Marielle," he said, his voice measured but tight. "This analysis contradicts the methodology you demonstrated. Were these numbers approved?" "No," I said quickly. "Someone changed them before submission." "I see. We value your transparency, but please resolve this immediately. Another delay, and our board will reconsider providers after the call." I stared at my screen until the numbers blurred. The edits had been made under my account. Whoever did it knew exactly where to strike. At noon, I passed Tazia in the hallway. She was laughing with one of the junior analysts, holding a coffee like nothing in the world could touch her. When she saw me, her smile didn't falter, but her eyes lingered just long enough to tell me she knew. That evening, I started printing hard copies of every file I touched. Each page felt like insurance against a disappearing truth. By midnight, the printer hummed steadily beside me, drowning out the quiet that had once been my refuge. It was no longer silence. It was a warning. By the end of that week, I stopped reporting the glitches. Every time I mentioned them, someone in management suggested user error. So I adapted quietly. Instead of filing complaints, I built my own backup system, mirrors of mirrors, encrypted drives labeled like grocery lists. I stopped trusting shared servers. I stopped trusting silence. Then, one afternoon, I called Jen Morales, an old colleague who'd left Keystone for an independent consultancy. She was one of the few people who still answered my calls without checking the time first. "You sound tired," she said. "I am," I admitted. "Do you still have contacts at Criterion Analytics?" "I might." "Why, I think Tazia's feeding them something that isn't hers." There was a pause. "You're saying she stole your model. I'm saying she studied every line of it before she called it a mistake." Jen sighed softly. "I'll see what I can find." 2 days later, she called back. "You were right. Criterion just hired Tazia. They're announcing her as Director of Strategic Forecasting next week." My throat went dry. "That title doesn't exist here." "It does now," she said, and she's scheduled to present at the Meridian Finance Conference. Topic: Innovations in Nonlinear Volatility Forecasting. The same phrase from my Wellington brief. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Jen said quietly, "She's playing dirty." "Mariel, what are you going to do? I'm going to learn the game." After the call, I opened a blank document and began listing everything I knew: dates, formula versions, timestamps, drafts. Each note was a breadcrumb, each breadcrumb a defense. This time, I wouldn't rely on anyone else to see the truth. I would show it. Exactly as she had taught me, only cleaner, sharper, undeniable. By midnight, the outline of a plan filled my screen. Not revenge, not yet, just precision, waiting for its moment. I sat back, watching the cursor blink like a pulse. I was done being quiet. The Meridian ballroom smelled faintly of coffee and nerves. Rows of executives filled the seats, murmuring over glossy programs. On the stage, Tazia adjusted the microphone, her smile sharp under the lights. "Today," she began, "I'll be sharing an innovative forecasting approach that challenges conventional assumptions about market volatility." I sat in the back row, my hands resting calmly in my lap. I'd been here since dawn, testing the presentation system, embedding a single file beneath hers, one command away from revelation. She advanced the slides, smooth as ever. Criterion Analytics has achieved an accuracy rate exceeding 80% across multiple sectors. Her next slide appeared my slide. Recolored, relabeled. I felt my chest tighten, but I waited. When she reached the midpoint of her presentation, I entered the command sequence on my tablet. The projector flickered once, then the screen split. On the left, her slide. On the right, mine identical charts, same data. Timestamps from months before she joined Criterion. Whispers broke across the audience. Someone near the front leaned forward, murmuring, "Those look identical." Tazia froze. "There seems to be a technical issue," she said quickly. "If we could have it." Another click. The next slide appeared side by side again, hers beside my original, this time. The header read, Development Timeline. The audience gasped softly. Dr. Nari from Wellington stood. That's Keystone's proprietary model, he said. Why is it here? Tazia's voice wavered. These were independent findings. The next slide cut her off an email exchange between her and me. Her questions about the model highlighted in yellow. The timestamp glowed across the top, weeks before she'd called my methods dangerous. I stood, walking down the aisle, each step echoed in the stunned quiet. There's no technical issue, I said. Only evidence. Tazia's face had gone pale. She tried to speak, but her microphone crackled uselessly. Cameras clicked. The audience, once restless, now leaned in to watch her unravel. I stopped beside the stage, meeting her eyes. Truth doesn't vanish, I said softly. It waits for its turn on the screen, and behind us, the projection kept playing. 3 days after the conference, the footage was everywhere. Clips of Tazia's frozen expression played on industry blogs, trade forums, even LinkedIn feeds. People called it the split-screen scandal. I didn't read the comments. That Monday, Director Paxton called me into his office. His tone was quieter than I'd ever heard. Wellington has renewed their contract for another 3 years. He said, Dr. Nari requested that you personally oversee all forecasting models going forward. I nodded. That's good news. He hesitated. Criterion terminated Tazia's employment this morning. They're trying to contain the damage. I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. The board has also approved a new position, Chief Methodology Officer. We'd like you to take it. I looked at him. That's a senior-level seat. It's overdue, he said simply. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He shifted papers on his desk, then added, You played that conference well. Mariel, unorthodox, but effective. I didn't play it. I said. I showed what was already true. He gave a small smile. Sometimes the truth needs a stage. When I left his office, the hallway felt strangely quiet, the kind of stillness that follows thunder. A few colleagues congratulated me in passing, their eyes flicking with curiosity. I recognized the look I'd worn at once myself, watching someone else win. Later that evening, I stood by the window of my new office. The skyline shimmered in the distance, cold and steady. On my desk sat the folder labeled Evidence, its edges soft from use. I thought about deleting it, but couldn't. Proof, once collected, becomes habit. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Nari Integrity, and innovation rarely coexist comfortably. You managed both. I set the phone down and exhaled. The satisfaction didn't feel like triumph. It felt like quiet balance, the space between exposure and peace. Somewhere beyond the glass, the city kept moving, its lights blinking like a pulse that never stopped. And for the first time in years, I felt no need to speak. The work and the truth had finally spoken for me.